This is the story of Dana Clair Edwards. Sources for today's episode: 48 Hours, casetext.com, findlaw.com, borderlawyering.com, and essaycurrent.com. Dana Clair Edwards was born June 30th, 1976. She grew up with two loving parents, Daryl Sr. and Deborah, both who adored her and her brother, Daryl Jr. The family settled in the city of San Antonio within the community of Alamo Heights. She attended St. Mary's Hall before attending Fredericksburg High School. Dana was popular with both her classmates and teachers. She was the president of the student council, an honor roll student, and a varsity cheerleader. Everyone loved her. She was full of energy and life and was described as the ultimate American girl, even claiming the titles of Gillespie County Fair Duchess and Farm Bureau Princess. Her mom especially loved her beautiful green eyes. She was also a huge animal lover. She was the kid who would bring home any stray animal. We're talking cats, dogs, ducks, you name it. As a kid, she also showed her European sport horses in hunter-jumper competitions. But her true loves were her rescue dogs, a Jack Terrier mix named Grit, who had been her companion for 11 years, and a newly adopted Maltese Terrier mix named Toby. They were her babies. She would even make them little costumes and decorate their collars for holidays. Dana went by the motto, wag more, bark less. Dana had many opportunities within her reach growing up and took full advantage of them. She had ambition and took initiative. She attended undergraduate classes at Southwestern University, where she held a position on the student board, which was one of only two positions. From Texas Tech University, she graduated summa cum laude. She then attended medical school at the University of Texas and dreamed of becoming a surgeon. Unfortunately, at the age of 23, she was in a car accident that caused 5 broken vertebrae in her neck, as well as a serious spinal cord injury. Ultimately, she dropped out of medical school to focus on her own healing. Dana didn't let the accident stop her from pursuing her education in a different path, though. She went on to earn her MBA with highest honors from Texas Tech University. Her real passion, though? Home design. She returned to San Antonio to help take care of her father, who was battling cancer, and worked as a designer and decorator for her family's construction business. In 2006, Dana started dating a man named John Thomas Ford, who went by Thomas. Thomas also worked for his family's construction company. They seemed to have much in common, and Dana's parents approved of the relationship. Though her brother, Daryl Jr., and his girlfriend didn't think the couple made sense. To be fair, Dana was fit, adventurous, motivated, and outgoing, while Thomas dressed, kind of nerdy, wasn't an outdoor guy, and seemed to be relatively quiet. And while sometimes opposites do attract, the biggest difference was their future goals. Dana had already accomplished so much in life. She was ready to settle down and start a family. Thomas, on the other hand, had more of a single mindset and wasn't ready for marriage and family. He wanted to go back to college and obtain a teaching degree before settling down. In late September of 2008, after 2.5 years of dating, Dana realized Thomas wasn't anywhere near ready for a commitment, so she decided to break things off. If you liked it, then you should have put a ring on it, Thomas, because he actually had a really hard time with the breakup. He wrote her a sappy letter dated October 1st, 2008. Quote, "I need you to know I am deeply saddened, hurt, and disappointed at the sudden termination of our relationship. I have not been able to sleep because I just lie in bed crying over this tremendous loss and loneliness I now feel. I can hardly make it through the day without my emotions taking over. Dana Clair, my heart is broken at the thought of losing you, and I feel as though our relationship has been taken away from me. I wish you would reconsider. There is too much time, money, and effort invested in this relationship to simply up and quit. You are the person I want to spend the rest of my life with and raise a family with. Love, Thomas." Unquote. Still, Dana held firm with her decision to end her romantic relationship with Thomas. Breakups are hard in general, but what probably made it harder in this case is they couldn't avoid seeing each other. They hung out with the same crowd and lived in the same town. Friends said they were amazingly civil when around each other, though, In the same month of the split, Thomas even invited Dana to his 40th birthday party. They ran into each other again at a Halloween party, and then 5 days before Christmas, Dana, Thomas, and their friends Melissa and Alan, and a few others rented a limo to look at Christmas lights. Then 2 days before Christmas, Thomas invited Dana over to pick up a present from him. Thomas became so emotional, Dana felt she couldn't leave him alone and ended up spending around 5 hours at his house trying to console him. She told her friend Melissa she finally had to just leave. Because of this, Melissa told her boyfriend, Alan, and then he let Thomas know, like, hey, Dana's going to be at one of these New Year's Eve parties that you're going to be attending. You know, just heads up, I know you're having a hard time with the split. And Alan said Thomas reacted fine to that news, stating it didn't seem to faze him at all. While at the party, the group started to play the game Apples to Apples. If you're not familiar, the judge draws a card with an adjective and then the other players submit a card from their hand containing the noun they think works best with that adjective. Melissa was still living with Alan as his girlfriend, but was more than ready for the next step. Alan was still hesitant and not ready for the whole white picket fence scenario. So when Melissa saw a card in her hand that read marriage, she jumped on the opportunity to play it and called out both Alan's and Thomas's inability to commit to the old ball and chain by pointing her finger at them both and said, quote, "This is for y'all," unquote, then exposed the marriage card. Most of the partygoers found it hilariously fitting and couldn't help but fill the room with laughter. Thomas, on the other hand, was not amused. Later, Thomas called Melissa over to him and let her know her little joke rubbed him the wrong way. The players took a break in the game and Thomas excused himself from the party a little after 11 p.m. At 11:31 p.m., Alan sent Thomas a text asking why he left. He responded it was no longer fun. He then texted Thomas again. No response. Alan tried calling 15 minutes later. Still no response. Alan, Melissa, and Dana all left the party around 12:45 a.m. Alan noticed Thomas left his cooler of beer, so he grabbed it and planned to drop it by his house. When Alan and Melissa slow rolled by, they didn't see his white Chevy Tahoe in his driveway or in the church parking lot behind his house where he sometimes parks, so they didn't stop to drop off the cooler. Once Alan arrived home, he texted Thomas again a little after 1 a.m., telling him he'd talk to him tomorrow and he had his beer. Alan and Thomas finally connected and made lunch plans, but Thomas later canceled, stating he was headed to Rockport instead. On New Year's Day, Dana's parents were expecting her to join them and her brother at the family's ranch in Fredericksburg, but when she didn't show and didn't answer their calls throughout the day, they sensed something was seriously wrong and headed to Dana's condo that also served as an office for their construction business in Alamo Heights. Her parents arrived and opened the front door to a pitch black condo. Dana's dogs, who normally greet them at the door, were missing. It didn't take long before they found their daughter. She was lying prone in a pool of blood, halfway in the guest bathroom, halfway out. A once white bath towel, now stained with blood, had been placed over her head. Dana's mother kneeled down beside her lifeless body and reached out to feel her leg, only to find she was cold to the touch. It was too late. Their beautiful, green-eyed American girl was gone. Dana's dog Toby eventually came out of wherever he was hiding. He was visibly shaken with fear, and his fur brother Grit was nowhere to be found. Police originally thought Dana's death could have been an accident. They thought maybe she fell and hit her head on the sink before smacking her head on the floor, but autopsy results quickly dismissed that theory when it came back stating Dana's cause of death was asphyxiation due to ligature strangulation. The autopsy also revealed lacerations and blunt force trauma to her head from being hit repeatedly. Dana had been murdered. There was no sign a robbery had occurred, no forced entry was made, nothing was missing except for Grit, Dana's Jack Russell Terrier mix that she loved dearly. When police asked if anyone would want to hurt Dana, an acquaintance wondered if Dana could have angered a contractor. With her strong take-it-or-leave-it personality, it wouldn't be completely out of the question. But after speaking to partygoers who spent that last night with Dana, it wouldn't take long for investigators to focus nearly all of their attention on Dana's ex-boyfriend, John Thomas Ford. Initially, Thomas was completely cooperative with the police department. His first interview with police was conducted without Thomas's lawyer present. He told investigators he'd left the party around 11:30 p.m., drove home, and watched some TV before falling asleep before midnight. When police asked if anyone else had used his vehicle or phone that night, he responded that would have been impossible. When asked to describe Dana, Thomas appeared to tear up before he stated she was a wonderful girl, full of energy, full of life, always there for others. He then wiped away what seemed to be tears before adjusting his glasses. As sincere as Thomas seemed after the police spoke with Melissa and Alan, something wasn't adding up. Melissa and Alan told police they had tried reaching Thomas and even drove by his house, but didn't stop due to his Tahoe not being present in either of the two usual spaces that he'd normally park it. Police then started looking into surveillance footage near Dana's condominium complex, Gallery Court, and found the bank's camera across the street had a great angle. It captured a white SUV traveling south entering the complex at 11:24 p.m., then exited the complex 2 minutes later. The SUV entered the complex again at 11:27 p.m., so just 3 minutes later, and then exited at 11:30 p.m. and headed north. A few minutes later, the surveillance camera showed a person walking south on the sidewalk wearing light-colored pants and a dark top and entering Gallery Court at 11:42 p.m. At 1 a.m., Dana's red Chevy Tahoe entered the complex. A neighbor who was outside reported seeing Dana walking Toby and Grit a little after 1 a.m. The figure is never seen exiting the complex on foot, but at 2:07 a.m., the white SUV was captured again headed south. At 3:12 a.m., the white SUV, this time blacked out, was headed north before it pulled into Gallery Court and then exited again at 3:16 a.m. The detective did say he realized there were dozens of white Tahoes or vehicles that look very similar to each other while watching the 6 hours of footage, but he recognized Thomas's Tahoe because of its unique characteristics. It had no luggage rack, a black tailgate lift handle, side railings, black trim, black handles, and a black rearview mirror, which made it distinguishable. Sadly, 2 weeks after Dana was found murdered, her beloved dog's Grit body was found at Alamos Dam, 2 miles from Dana's condo. It appeared he had been severely beaten before he was thrown from the basin overlook. The district attorney filed an application in accordance with the Stored Communication Act to obtain 4 days of historical cell site location information for Thomas's cell phone. And what they found didn't match up with his story. Those texts and calls Alan had sent Thomas between 11:30 and 1 a.m.-ish, they all pinged off the cell tower nearest to Gallery Court. When the director of radio engineering was asked if Thomas's phone could have pinged off Gallery Court's tower, he replied the Gallery Court tower doesn't reach Thomas's address because the terrain drops off, which prevents the line of sight needed. When asked what would be a reasonable explanation for Thomas's phone to ping off of Gallery Court's tower, the expert explained Thomas's phone would have been near Gallery Court. At 11:32 a.m., Thomas's phone pinged off the cell tower close to Alamos Dam, where Grit's lifeless body was found. When police asked Thomas if he would give them the clothing he wore to the New Year's Eve party, he refused and lawyered up. He didn't hire just any lawyer. He hired one of the most prominent and, one can assume, most expensive criminal defense attorneys in Texas. Dana's mom, Deborah, couldn't help but make sure Thomas knew she wasn't going away, and I love her for it. Around a month after her daughter's death, she began sending Thomas cards and emails. On Valentine's Day, she sent him an innocent enough message saying, quote, "Thinking of you," unquote. Then when Mother's Day came along, she sent a card stating, quote, "Never the same," unquote. In one email, she asked him how long he had been planning the murders of Dana and Grit. And I mean, she doesn't stop. One said, "The title is so cold, happy anniversary." And then another read, "The evil in your soul sustains you." Still another, "Enjoy the sunshine while you can." In all, there were over 30 messages sent. She also put up posters with Dana's face on every flat surface of a 3-block radius surrounding Thomas's parents' home. While Deborah was packing up Dana's condo, she noticed a heavyweight antique 3-punch hole as well as an extension cord were missing from Dana's office area. Neither item was ever found, but Dana's mother believed the objects were used to kill her daughter. So I don't know what was going on with the police department's evidence room chain of custody situation, but it's safe to say it sucked. At least at this time, this case was active because they happened to lose so many things, such as the first crime scene sketch, Dana's fingernail clippings, the underwear she was wearing when she was found, as well as clearer surveillance footage from a second camera at the bank across from the gallery court where Dana lived. All have just vanished. Luckily, they didn't completely screw up and managed to keep the bloody towel that covered Dana's face and found not one, but 2 cuttings from the bloody towel contained Thomas's DNA profile. In February 2010, a little more than a year after Dana's death, Thomas was arrested for murder. It would be 2 more years before the case made it to trial. The prosecution argued that Ford entered Dana's complex in the SUV, then parked the vehicle outside before entering on foot and waiting for her to return home. He killed her and then transported Grit to the Alamos Dam. His cell phone records showed he was at Dana's complex and later at the location where Grit's body was found. They also presented the towel with Thomas's DNA. The defense argued Thomas immediately went to bed that evening and his car was parked right in front of his own house, and the 2 eyewitnesses failed to notice it because it was so dark out. They also suggested his DNA evidence was on the towel because Thomas had visited Dana just 10 days before her death. They ended with the white SUV seen driving into Dana's complex was a very common vehicle and could not be linked directly to Thomas. During the 4-week-long trial, people started noticing Dana's parents always had a black backpack by their side. When Daryl finally took the witness stand, he told jurors the backpack contained the ashes of his daughter and her dog Grit. He stated the 3-year time period between Dana's death and the trial had been psychologically devastating, even referring to each day as another day in purgatory. He told them he has been unable to run his home building business since she's died. After the jury spent 8 hours over a 2-day deliberation, they found Thomas guilty of murder. He was sentenced to 40 years in prison and is eligible for parole in 20 years. But let's end this on a happy note. For Dana's memorial, her brother organized an event with adoptable puppies in Dana's memory, and every single one of the puppies were adopted. I want to thank you for tuning in today and listening to this story. Please remember to like and subscribe and follow me on all of the social media channels. I'd love some suggestions for stories that you'd love me to cover. Please don't hesitate to send those to me. You can direct message me on Instagram or email me at weallscream.truecrime@gmail.com. I would love to hear from you. Also, if you're watching on YouTube, I have this really cute raven lamp that I found on Amazon, and I was seeing if anybody had any name suggestions for him. It doesn't have to be a boy. It could be a girl. Anyway, I hope you guys have a great week. Stay safe the 4th of July. Don't lose any appendages or extremities. And remember, trust no one.